China's food delivery market has experienced explosive growth in recent years. It was worth some $150 billion in 2022, larger than the economy of Morocco. Critics, however, say the gigantic sector is built on exploitation of the country's millions of delivery riders. Well, authorities in February tightened regulations in a bid to step up protections. CNA's Emil Wan follows two riders in Shanghai to find out what it's like to be a delivery worker in China's wealthiest city.
我老家来自安徽，属于安徽的一个小县城。90年35虚岁了，已经到了没有梦想的那个年龄了。我是去年23年1月份开始转行做这个的嘛。开始的时候是抱着就是过渡一下，继续去找工作这个想法来做的。但是随着这个越早越做，越发现这个年龄在上海不是特别好混，不是特别好找。有很多人说很喜欢外卖行业的自由，其实如果说你真正跑起来，你其实一点都不自由。从早上8、9点钟，可能到晚上11、12点钟，这是我的一个这个工作时间。有的人可能时间更久。整个行业的话，现在目前处于一个低谷期吧，单价低、单量少、骑手多，基本上就是。如果说今年让我才开始跑外卖的话，我估计我坚持不了1个礼拜，我就不会去做了。对于一个新手来说的话，可能一天跑下来还不够你的生活成本，对吧？像我们跑的时间久一点了，然后地方熟悉一点了，目前还在坚持。拍很久了。清晨到了。给他打个电话就可以了。有时候送到那个小区里面，一些年龄大一点的，或者是就是性格和蔼一点的，他会主动让电梯给你。您先走，让你先走。他知道你很急，你很忙，他让你先走，他宁愿等下一班。哎，你好，外卖放桌子上了啊。外卖放桌子上了啊！那昨天也遇到一个态度不好的，送到人家办公楼，也很急嘛，也没有看他们说什么警示，外卖小哥不给入内，让你在门口打电话，我推门进去了，人家就呵斥你，让你离开这里，也有。最困难的可能就是下雨天啊。那个雨水比较大，路面比较滑，很容易出交通事故。那就走了啊。好。虽然我们现在有保险啊，但是你受伤了之后，这个东西你一天就白干，没有钱挣了嘛，对吧？1天、2天或者3天，你要休养一下嘛。房租啊，然后小朋友吃喝呀，然后目前差不多有个1万多块钱吧。但是在上海这一块的话，1万多块钱，像我们租个房子都要2、3千了，对不对？如果是和老婆、小孩一块住，所以租的像他们有的外卖小哥，可能他们合租一下，成本没这么大。那我这一块可能是最大的一块吧，基本上说余不了什么钱。
主要是我家里发展有点慢。然后那个工资对我来说不太高，我现在有点负债，然后说想着来上海，上海这地方毕竟是在国内的1线城市嘛，我想看一下有没有什么机会，或者是找点高工作的、高收入的，去还一下我目前的这个负债的情况。
哎，哥们儿，咱们到了啊，秒卡清10啊。
学历比较低吧，然后14岁就不上学了嘛，在初2的时候就已经不上学了。
23。
这个工作吧，看你说辛不辛苦也要因人而异了。对我来说的话，这个工作还挺好啊，没有什么职场困扰。我之前干保安啊，也是要听一个小队长的，那个我太繁琐了。干了快递员这个外卖员之后， 觉得没有人管。现在包容性还挺好的，就像上海这个地方还是挺好的，基本上大家都理解，都知道快递员还有外卖员都很辛苦，基本上一般不会遇到什么那种刁难人的情况，一般没有。我现在住的是上海的一个郊区吧，松江区。对，这是听他们说这是老上海，就是上海发源地嘛。然后我想着来这边试一试，但是呢，这边的是因为是郊区嘛，他就说他这个工作，不管是工作也好还是什么也好，消费低，但是工资也低。这个时候是我最难的时候，我那个时候是在睡大街，然后第二天起来就是帮别人送菜送饭，然后还不能到处跑，还要天天做核酸啊，做这个做那个。那个时候天又冷，然后又没有被子，基本上都是找一个桥洞或者找一个地下室就睡了。
今年先看一下小孩幼儿园能不能读上，如果说读不上的话，可能把老婆小孩都送回老家去，一个人在这里先干着，然后同时再能换一份工作的话，肯定会换一份工作啊。如果说换不了的话，还会再继续坚持个一段时间吧。
Joining us for more on this discussion, we've got Jack Chu, Shaw Foundation Professor of Media Technology from Nanyang Technological University, and CNA's Beijing correspondent Olivia Seong. Olivia, let's start with you first. I mean, can't help but my heart goes out to all these delivery drivers talking about 16-hour days, low pay, and they get fined if they are late on top of that. So what exactly is drawing people to these jobs despite the tough conditions?
I'll tell you, it really speaks to the evolution of China's economy with increased internet access and the boom of the e-commerce industry. Being able to order something on my smartphone and having it being delivered really just becoming a way of life right now. Even where I am, we are near residential buildings and offices. It's around dinner time right now, and so you'll see these delivery riders whizzing by behind me, trying to get their orders in. Sometimes you even see them running to drop off their orders as well. They all also form part of what's known as the gig economy. The delivery riders, affectionately known as 外卖小哥 in Chinese, translated to food delivery little brother. And that not only speaks to the work that they do, but also because many of them are young and male. And increasingly, we are seeing more young people take up these jobs, as we know that China has faced an unemployment issue hitting record levels among youth, as we have seen last year. Ateli.
Yeah. Professor, let's just bring you in here. I mean, in February, we know that the Chinese government, they did push for new guidelines, essentially to put pressure on food delivery giants like Meituan and Didi, for instance, to tackle all these excessive work hours and poor work conditions. But what do you make of this move? I mean, have we seen the extent of the impact it's had so far?
Yes, the Chinese government actually has been paying attention to this gig economy sector for at least 8 years. Right, my research team have looked at ride-hailing, so that is the Didi, in China, equivalent of Grab in Singapore, and in Shanghai, that's what we did 8 years ago, and also nationally. And for food delivery, we have been collaborating with the union in Beijing municipality also from 8 years ago. So from the very beginning, actually, I would say 8 years ago, the local governments, the local unions are very much aware of the potential exploitation because China is still a socialist country. So the labor law, the labor regulation is actually pretty progressive by global standards. Whereas the local government official, the labor regulators saw it at quite early on that this could be just another way to bypass China's existing labor regulatory system. However, because the gig economy was growing very quickly, before and even during the pandemic, like food delivery was very essential, okay, for the livelihood of the citizens. So they did not take such a harsh stance, all right, and also scrutiny, and also there are still a lot of investments going into the food delivery or other kind of gig economy. So it's generating a lot of jobs, right? But now in recent, in the last couple of years, especially since the end of the pandemic, the global macroeconomic situation is changing. So there's much less hot money going into the sector. And so the growth rate is slowing down. And so the government, it's not just for gig economy, but for other kind of tech sector. So they are taking more of a scrutiny and also with the eye to create more sustainable employment rather than just short term, as we just saw in the video before this interview.
Yeah. So, Professor, I hear what you're saying about the gig economy generating a lot of jobs. You mentioned that their labor laws are progressive, but Olivia, I mean, I know you've been busy trawling through the internet, perhaps Weibo and all of that. What is the chatter actually? I mean, in terms of, we've heard some of the key concerns of the delivery riders earlier, but what else are they discussing online?
I'll tell you, the plight facing the delivery riders does come up quite regularly, whether it's in news headlines or on social media, primarily revolving around issues relating to wages and welfare. Earlier this year, we heard about a delivery driver who he said was able to make more 1 million yuan. That works out to about $140,000 in 3 years. Now, that sparked a heated debate online, some people praising him for his work ethic, but it also caused some people to question whether this was actually true, even angering some other delivery riders. And then we also heard recently about a sad case of a delivery rider who was stabbed to death by a security guard for entering a gated community. Of course, we also do hear about positive examples. We have this video here that I believe the team will pull up to show how a delivery rider actually jumped off a bridge in Hangzhou into the water to save a woman who was inside. And one of the things that he said reportedly after getting out from the water was that, oh no, his delivery is going to be late. And that speaks to the pressures that delivery riders face. Of course, that gentleman was rewarded with a cash reward and even a scholarship to go study. But every time the news about delivery riders comes up, it brings to light once again the challenging circumstances that they work in. I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, it's comforting to know that that particular delivery guy is awarded, cash and scholarship. But Professor, we talked about all these regulations there, or rather guidelines, they are being recommended or introduced in February. But how exactly will they be enforced, though? I mean, how are the authorities keeping track and holding these companies accountable in terms of making sure the welfare of these drivers are met?
Yeah, enforcement is always an issue, okay, in countries, as big as China. It's vast, okay, there are many layers of the hierarchy, right? But remember, we're talking about gig economy, so it's a data-fied economy. So if we look at the perspective of the enforcement perspective, argument can actually be made to say it's easier to regulate, to enforce, because you can get all the data, about the working conditions, how many hours. So just now it was mentioned that 16-hour, work duration per day, which is definitely against the Chinese labor law that stipulates 8-hour workday. Okay, even Chinese labor law permits a certain amount of overtime work, but not 16 hours per day, right? And so using a data-fied platform these days, actually, there could be more objective, you can say even real-time data to tell the government, to tell the regulator who are violating the working condition, the work hour regulation. at what time in what location. So theoretically, okay, the datafied platform can be more easily, regulated through data enforcement mechanisms. But this is in theory. In practice, there can be new challenges because these data are fine-grained, on the ground, real-time data. These are big data, right? And the regulators may or may not have the means just to make sense of all these huge data on the ground. Actually, it will take new capacity. So one thing we know about bureaucracies, government authorities around the world, not just in China, is that they do not necessarily want to get their hands dirty, with on-the-ground real-time data. So there's a challenge, for the Chinese labor law enforcement to find some intermediary, okay, rather than just having the existing labor departments who are not among the most resourceful government departments in China, but then they probably need some help, some intermediary to make sense about how the labor situation is run and how it can be monitored and even enforced. And there's another mechanism of enforcement is not during the work process involving big data, but also, in the court system. There are actually hundreds of court cases against abuse of gig workers. So that's also ongoing in China on another front.
Prof, I apologize. I would like to just jump into this discussion. I know you're speaking a lot about the government efforts and what the regulators can do more. But in your opinion, is there any incentives for the platforms, these private companies, delivery platforms, to do more to improve the welfare of these delivery riders? Because after all, they are profit making, and the costs that could be passed on to consumers must be weighing on their mind as well.
Yes, I agree with you. These are privately held companies. And in China, one of their ultimate nightmares is that they can be collected, they can be nationalized. Okay, they can, if they don't do it right, they can be under serious penalty, like what happened to Didi, right? And so it's actually part, I would say, naturally, this kind of large-scale platform company want to do good PR at the very least. So they would tell the stories about how workers benefit, how they're abiding by all Chinese laws, including labor law. But then I would say there's another thing we need to bear in mind is that China have a labor shortage. So if they don't provide, sufficient wages, okay, if they don't, but if they exploit too much, then they will not be attractive to gig workers who can move to other platforms or other sectors. So I think they are. It's a complicated issue, all right? And but then there are openings, okay, for these platforms to think from the perspective of workers that is also benefiting the platform themselves.
Well, very many thanks for that in-depth discussion. Jack Chu from Nanyang Technological University and CNA's Olivia Xiong in Beijing. Thank you for that.